On today's video, we are going to review our latest release and talk about what worked and what didn't, and what you can do to avoid blowing hard-earned cash on your next release. So stick with us. Thanks for joining us on Adventures of the Siege, where we give you a warts and all breakdown of what's happening to our little band as we try to grow, just like any new music group. So, a little about me if you're new to our channel. While Siege Perilous is a relatively new project, and I'll be talking about what I experienced with our first release with Siege, this isn't my first rodeo, so to speak. I've been an active gigging musician since 2006, and have been releasing and promoting music on digital platforms since 2010. With my first band, the Stubby Shillelaghs, which is still active, just not as active as we used to be, we've managed to get over 300,000 streams on Spotify and are still growing every day. Now, a lot of the background parts of that were built before some of the major changes to Spotify and to other social media platforms in general. So going into this project, I'm viewing it as a blank slate and trying to adopt new social media strategies, because while the Stubby's streams are growing, overall social media engagement for them is also down. If you stumbled on this and don't know me or my bands, that's great and not super surprising. This band is called Siege Perilous. We're an old school heavy metal band that focuses on epic storytelling, big sounds, and shredding guitar solos. This is the band I've always wanted to make and the stories I've always wanted to tell through music, so I have a major passion for this project, which is the key to why you should be doing anything, but especially in music. Without asking, I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, you're doing that? Good luck finding fans. They might be right, but what I'm hoping is that with the right marketing strategy, I can find the right audience. When you think about how many people play Dungeons and Dragons or still see Iron Maiden when they go on tour, I think there's definitely millions of people around the world who could, not saying will, but could love our music. And so marketing is about how do we find them and expose them to enough of our content and music to turn them into fans. I have a personal philosophy that we make the music we want and then try to find fans that connect with that, rather than maybe the more tried and true method of making music tailored to the audience. So we'll see if that pans out. So I started off this kind of journey into marketing by listening to Damian Keys and joining his online music business academy. The advice is really high quality, the tools are nice, and Damian himself gives solid personalized advice on the private Facebook community that comes with the package. I recommend it overall. However, there are some aspects of it that haven't been updated, and even by Damian's own admission, some of the strategies and advice are a little bit dated. So let's go over what worked and what didn't. Let's start with overall social media strategy. So Damian suggested focusing on short form micro content in the form of TikTok, Instagram Reels, and Facebook Stories. So what I did, and it seems to be a solid bang for my buck, is to make something that works across all of these platforms. TikTok has been slow growth for me because I still don't quite see all of the appeal of the platform. I'm clearly a bit older than the target demographic of the platform, and frankly, I'm just not that hip. But I was able to do some fun things with the duet function and always have that available when I need to make a piece of content that shows off what I can do with music and, most importantly, interact with similar musicians in the metal community and the music community in general. It's also fun, which is super important for keeping a social strategy going, right? You have to be consistent. This part can feel like a grind and sometimes feels a little self-indulgent and narcissistic, but you should rest assured that it will feel that way more to you than it will be perceived that way by other people. Honestly, though, my core interactions have still been on Facebook, the platform that I know and that I've always had much more success growing with. But a piece for TikTok can extend to Instagram Reels and Facebook Stories, and so that is super valuable. Good time bang for your buck. And I've been averaging about 1,000 views per video across the three platforms, which for a startup band is not bad. And those numbers have been growing as our followers have also been slowly growing. This hasn't been about a fast track, but consistency and growth has been solid for now, especially as we gear up for our more engaging and epic content that should help us continue to build things like our Quest or Die music video that we've got coming up that's going to be really fun. This is super important. Know your brand. Even across other metal bands, I've seen a lot of them not really know what their brand is. Why should people care about your music, and how do they know what you're doing is for them? So for us, our brand is all around epic fantasy storytelling with an old school heavy metal feel. So we try to make it clear through our art and banners that if you like Dio, if you like dragons, if you like swords, that this is a place for you. But obviously that's not everyone's brand. That would suck for us if it was. So what's your draw? If people come into your channel, what will they find there? And think of limits, right? While we may delve into medieval history, martial arts, and LARP, all of our subtopics fit into our brand and the way we write music and tell stories. We're still honing in on that target audience, so you'll probably see our YouTube offerings start with a wider spread and then narrow down a bit as we start to see what works and what doesn't. Don't keep making the same mistake just because you spent a long time making it. Okay, so veering from social media strategy, let's talk about the release itself. So the first potentially controversial choice we made was to release an EP as opposed to a single. The thinking was that we should get more content out there so that when people go to our Spotify, they have a reason to stay for a bit longer. In retrospect, I still think this was a wise decision for the start, as there's a fairly even spread amongst our songs. Not surprisingly, the song that's last on the EP has the fewest amount of streams, for now. But had we concentrated all of those streams into one song, our chances of triggering the Spotify algorithm to put us on more playlists would have increased. However, with our modest but solid numbers, I'm not sure that would have given us a massive boost. We're talking about hundreds of streams, not thousands or tens of thousands. Overall, I think for a first release, the EP was a good idea, though we will be shifting to a singles release strategy starting at the beginning of 2023 with our next single, Black Death. As many people do, we also submitted to playlists. For us, this is challenging because there aren't a lot of high traffic metal playlists that work for the classic metal / power metal subgenres that we live in. We spent about $50 on Submit Hub, splitting that between playlist submissions, blogs, and social media influencers. Yeah, that last part kind of made my heart barf a little, but I did want to test all marketing possibilities. I did Submit Hub 2 years ago when the Stubby Shillelaghs released our last album, Glass to Mouth, and it was a huge waste of time and money. Nobody was receptive to what we were doing, and it went nowhere on Submit Hub, so I was hesitant to do it again. This time, however, we actually had really good reception and got onto somewhere around 2/3 to 3/4 of the playlists and blogs we submitted to. Even a lot of our rejections were just because the playlist wanted more extreme metal than what we bring to the table. While I'm super grateful for the feedback and the support, as of this writing, the playlists only account for about 16 or 17 streams, with 4 of those being from a playlist that took free submissions via email. It's harder to tell if the blogs had much of an influence, but based on what streams are coming from which countries, I wouldn't say this was great bang for our buck either. Once again, the paid submissions to blogs in places like Brazil didn't have nearly the impact of just putting in sweat equity like when we applied to contact sites and bloggers in Germany. The results are modest, but at least point to something happening. Overall, I would suggest saving this money because, at least for us, it didn't yield a lot of results when we paid for the submissions. The social media influencer posts were odd, off-brand, and while they got views, they didn't seem to make any moves for us on streaming or on our social media platforms. They also didn't always follow instructions like tagging our page in their post, which seems like a fair deal when you're paying for them to use your content. We also tried some paid ads. I followed advice from Damien and Andrew Southworth to try and target our audience and build an ad strategy. So I started by trying to just build up some followers on our pages. Building up our Facebook was actually pretty easy and cheap. I targeted Iron Maiden fans in places like India and the Philippines. Well, I targeted lots of places, but Facebook eventually whittled it down to those places to try to give me the best bang for my buck. And it did, as I could get new followers for a penny or less. And the good news is this has really increased interaction with posts and views on my Facebook page. So for that aspect, I'd really highly recommend going with this strategy to start getting some traction and some interaction. And while I wouldn't do it exclusively for this, it is also a good proof of concept. People who knew me and knew what I was doing started taking me and the project more seriously when they saw that my Facebook followers were in the thousands. Unfortunately, this didn't pan out as well when I extended this over to trying to build Instagram and TikTok. My cost per conversion was much, much higher. TikTok promotions are also much clunkier for the purposes of my music, which needs to find others within its smaller but much more dedicated audience than, say, rap or pop music. If you make rap or pop music, TikTok will probably be better for you, as the number of views and impressions you get is fairly decent bang for your buck. But for me, if I'm not getting my music in front of heavy metal or fantasy fans like myself, the odds of a conversion are pretty low. It also doesn't help that our overall demographic skews a little older, between 25 and 40 for the vast majority of our fans. I'll try TikTok again once I have some content that might have some broader appeal, and I might be able to gain a little bit more traction with an ad. Instagram ads were good for views and impressions, but not for converting fans. It's clunkier than Facebook for this. It takes you out of Instagram and then back into Instagram. And anything that stands in the way of someone clicking that like button is going to reduce conversions drastically, since all you can do is send them to your profile. If you've got a useful tip for advertising on social media, please comment below. We'd love to hear and engage with your thoughts and experiences on this. So, you're probably asking yourself, Shaughnessy, well, what the heck does work then? For me, it was all about building those relationships and building up the fan base. Reaching out to them. So, for example, I did short little videos for a bunch of the fans who I was also Facebook friends with, who I knew might be interested, but may need that little extra push to actually listening. And I made sure that all of them were personalized with their names, something that I had seen that they were up to lately, things like that, right? Being, like a real and honest person. And that helps make them a part of it. Making your audience a part of what you're doing is really, really crucial. So some of this was super direct. It came from the beginning when two of the songs that we wrote were inspired directly from stories we participated in our live action roleplay or LARP. I mean, this wasn't a grand strategy to get listeners. It was legitimate and real. But once the songs were written, we knew that we had a built-in listener base from other people that had experienced the story with us, or people who were interested in live action roleplay. So as long as your music has a personal connection, there's probably a few people that might be part of that story in some way, shape, or form. And that's a good way to start building that fan base. The second thing that really helped was having a focused strategy building towards the release. So for about a month before, I was making social media content with the same clips from songs, trying to get the tunes stuck in people's heads. This is something that Damien had suggested. I'd be hanging out with friends and they'd start humming those hooks, which was a good way to know that it was working because they didn't even know that they were doing it. And if it gets stuck in your friends' heads, that tells you that it's probably only a matter of getting it in front of enough people and exposing them to it enough times to get it stuck in their heads as well. So that's the next strategy. We just shifted our marketing from phase 1, which was focused on Betrayal of the Dracolich, to phase 2, which will focus on Down to the Black for the next few weeks, before moving on to phase 3 with Quest or Die. Each phase will do some light advertising pushes, retarget audiences, and try to grow. Music marketing, the thing that I'm learning, and I am still learning too, is all about taking a step, seeing what happens, and pivoting in the most valuable directions. So, subscribe to our channel for lots of fun fantasy content, behind the scenes of our music with Siege Perilous, and more experiences and tips to help you get the most out of your music. Have an awesome day, and rock on.